Welcome to the deep dive. Ever stop to think, why them? Why that person?
It's a fundamental question, isn't it?
Totally. Today we're doing a deep dive into the science of attraction. We're working from this really great Self-Sensei report, The Science of Attraction. What draws us to others?
Yeah, it's a comprehensive look.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding all those forces, biological, psychological, cultural, that pull us together.
Exactly. It's not magic, though it can feel like it sometimes. It's this complex mix. The report breaks it down really well, from, our evolutionary history right up to how Instagram filters might be changing things.
And our mission here is just to pull out the core ideas, the really compelling stuff for you, without getting bogged down in jargon.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, the really deep beginning. The primal blueprint, as the report calls it. Evolution.
Right. The basic idea is that attraction isn't random. It's a system that evolution has shaped.
To help us pick partners who are good bets for survival and having healthy kids.
Pretty much. It's about maximizing reproductive success, ultimately. And a lot of what we find attractive are basically signals or cues for good underlying qualities. Evolutionary shortcuts, you could say.
Shortcuts, I like that. Okay, so visually, the report talks a lot about facial symmetry.
It does. And it's more than just looking, aesthetically pleasing.
Right, it's deeper.
Much deeper. Symmetry is often seen as an honest signal of developmental stability. Like, if your development wasn't thrown off course by illness or bad genes or environmental stress,
You're more likely to turn out symmetrical.
Exactly. So it can be a visual cue for a strong constitution, good genes. And studies do show people across different cultures tend to prefer more symmetrical faces.
Okay, symmetry equals robustness. Got it. But then the report mentions averageness being attractive. That feels a bit counterintuitive. No, we want special, not average.
Yeah, sounds odd. But the idea, sometimes called koinophilia, is that features that are too unusual, too far from the average, might potentially signal harmful genetic mutations.
So averages maybe safer, genetically speaking.
That's the thinking. It's like an evolutionary risk management strategy. Preferring the average avoids the extremes, which could be problematic.
Okay, interesting. So symmetry and averages for the face. What about body shape? That waist-to-hip ratio thing comes up.
Definitely. For women, a lower waist-to-hip ratio, classically around 0.7, is often rated as more attractive.
And that's linked to hormones.
Yes, it correlates with estrogen levels, fertility, and even lower risk for certain diseases. So it's seen as a potential signal of reproductive capability.
And for men, the V shape.
Right, the broader shoulders relative to the waist. That's linked to testosterone levels and often perceived as indicating strength or dominance. Again, potential signals of fitness.
Like our bodies are broadcasting these signals all the time.
Pretty much. And that ties into sexual dimorphism, too, those typically male or female characteristics.
Like jaw lines and brow ridges in men.
Exactly. Those are linked to testosterone. There's even this interesting idea, the immunocompetence handicap hypothesis.
Okay, break that down.
Well, high testosterone can actually suppress the immune system slightly. So the theory goes, if a male can display those high testosterone features and still be healthy, he must have a really robust immune system underneath. It's like surviving a handicap.
Wow. Okay, that's complex. And for women, things like fuller lips.
Yes, features like larger eyes, fuller lips, smoother skin, they're often associated with youth, estrogen, and fertility. Fuller lips specifically are mentioned as a potential fertility indicator.
So much going on just with what we see.
Yeah.
But what about smell? Pheromones, are they the secret ingredient?
Pheromones. It's a fascinating area, but honestly still quite debated in humans. The report mentions compounds like androstatamo from male sweat or copulins from female secretions.
And they have some effect.
Studies suggest they can influence mood or hormone levels in others, yeah. But whether humans have true functional sex pheromones like insects do, and whether our VNO, that potential pheromone-detecting organ, is really functional in adults, that's still up in the air.
So not quite a love potion then.
Probably not that straightforward, maybe subtle influences, but the evidence for a major direct role isn't conclusive yet.
Okay. But there's another smell thing, the MHC, major histocompatibility complex. That's immune system stuff, right?
Exactly. MHC genes are vital for our immune system to recognize pathogens, and incredibly, they seem to influence attraction through body odor.
The sweaty T-shirt studies, I've heard of those.
That's the classic example. Women often prefer the scent of men whose MHC genes are different from their own.
Why different?
The evolutionary advantage is likely twofold. It promotes genetic diversity in offspring, leading to kids with more robust immune systems, and it helps avoid inbreeding.
So our noses are trying to guide us towards genetic compatibility. That's amazing.
It is pretty wild. But the report also mentions the MHC paradox,
Yeah.
meaning that while those T-shirt studies often show clear preferences for MHC dissimilarity, when researchers look at actual couples, the correlation isn't always as strong. It gets complicated.
Why would that be?
Well, other factors come into play. People might prefer partners from similar ethnic backgrounds, for instance, which can mean more similar MHC. Hormonal contraceptives can also mess with scent preferences, so real-world choices are influenced by more than just MHC scent.
Right. Life isn't a lab study.
Yeah.
Okay, moving beyond the purely biological, the report talks about cues for resources and investment, what someone can provide.
Yes, because historically, raising offspring successfully required resources and commitment. So evolution likely favored paying attention to signals of that.
Like status,
Yeah.
education, job, ambition.
Exactly. Those can act as proxies for earning potential, stability, the ability to provide. It's not always conscious, but these things can factor into attractiveness judgment.
And not just having stuff, but being willing to share. Right.
Yeah.
Kindness, generosity,
Yeah.
dependability.
Absolutely crucial. Those behaviors signal a willingness to commit, to be a cooperative and supportive partner, which is incredibly valuable, especially for long-term relationships. It paints a picture of a reliable investor in the family unit.
So the evolutionary picture is really this mosaic of visual cues, sense signals, and behavioral indicators.
All pointing towards the potential for good genes, healthy offspring, and a stable partnership. It's a complex calculation happening beneath the surface.
Okay, that's the deep history. Now let's zoom into the brain, the neurochemical cocktail. When we feel that spark, what's actually happening inside? Sounds like internal fireworks.
It really can feel like it. The report details how attraction just floods the brain with neurotransmitters and hormones. Dopamine's a big one, right?
Yeah, the reward chemical. It makes you feel good, focused, motivated.
Totally. It surges when you interact with, or even just think about the person you're attracted to. That's the euphoria, the intense focus, that feeling of, I need to see them again. It drives that pursuit.
And then there's norepinephrine. That's the adrenaline-like one.
Kind of, yeah. It creates alertness, arousal, the racing heart, the sweaty palms, that jittery excitement.
Like a mini stress response, almost.
In a way. It also amps up your attention and memory, which might be why those early encounters feel so vivid, why you remember tiny details.
Makes sense. Now, serotonin is interesting. I thought that was about feeling calm and happy.
Usually, yes. But in the very early stages of intense attraction, serotonin levels might actually drop.
Really? Why?
Well, lower serotonin is linked to obsessive thinking, preoccupation, patterns similar to OCD, actually.
Whoa. So that can't stop thinking about them. Lovesick feeling.
Might literally be linked to a dip in serotonin. It helps explain that obsessive focus.
Mind blown.
Oh.
Okay, what about PEA? Beta-phenylethylamine. The report calls it the love molecule.
It gets called that sometimes in popular science, yeah. It's a natural amphetamine-like compound.
So it gives you energy, euphoria.
The idea is that it might surge in early attraction, possibly enhancing dopamine and norepinephrine release, contributing to that intense high. Maybe released by eye contact or touch, but...
There's a but.
Yeah, the report is careful to point out its exact role isn't fully proven. It might be involved, but calling it the love molecule might be overstating its specific function compared to, say, dopamine. And some link it more to aggression, too, so it's complex.
Okay, so part of the mix, but maybe not the solo star.
Got it.
Then the hormones oxytocin and vasopressin, the bonding one.
The powerhouses of bonding, absolutely. Oxytocin is the cuddle hormone. Released during touch, orgasm, it promotes trust, closeness, reduces anxiety. Super important for attachment.
And vasopressin.
Works alongside it, particularly implicated in longer-term pair bonding, maybe even some mate-guarding behaviors in some species. It helps solidify that connection.
So dopamine and norepinephrine for the initial rush, oxytocin and vasopressin for the deeper connection.
That's a good way to think about the general shift, yeah.
And surprisingly, cortisol, the stress hormone, is involved too in early romance.
It seems so. Love-induced hypercortisolemia, the report calls it. Starting a new relationship is kind of stressful, right? Meeting someone new, navigating feelings.
Definitely butterflies, maybe some anxiety.
So that temporary rise in cortisol might actually help mobilize energy, help us focus, maybe overcome some of that initial social anxiety to pursue the relationship.
Huh. Using stress to our advantage. Weirdly makes sense. And finally, the big ones, testosterone and estrogen. They obviously drive libido, but they shape preferences too.
For sure. In men, higher testosterone might correlate with finding more feminine faces attractive, especially for short-term flings, perhaps because those features signal fertility.
But it cuts both ways.
Yeah, the report notes some research suggests higher testosterone might also make men more sensitive to potential signs of infidelity in a long-term partner. And for women, the picture is linked to their cycle.
Right, the ovulatory shift idea.
Exactly. The hypothesis is that when fertility is highest around ovulation, women might show a stronger preference for more masculine traits, maybe those testosterone markers we talked about.
But that's debated too.
It is. The evidence is mixed, as the report points out. Some studies find it, others don't, or the effects are small. So it's not a settled picture. Hormones like estrogen can also influence how women feel about their current partner, sometimes more critically when estrogen is high.
Wow. It's such an intricate dance in the brain.
Absolutely. This neurochemical soup is constantly shifting, driving those intense early feelings, and then supporting the transition to more stable, bonded love.
Okay, so we've got evolution and brain chemistry.
Yeah.
But our minds, our psychology, obviously plays a huge part too.
A massive part. Our experiences, the way we think, how we interact, it all shapes attraction. The report highlights proximity, for starters.
Just being near someone makes you like them more. The mere exposure effect.
Generally, yes. Familiarity tends to breed liking, or at least comfort. We tend to like what's familiar. It makes sense. You see someone often, you interact, opportunities for connection arise.
But there's a catch, right? If you dislike them initially.
Then more exposure can backfire. That's the social allergy effect. If someone rubs you the wrong way from the start, seeing them more often can just make you dislike them even more intensely.
Good point. Okay, so proximity opens the door, usually. What about similarity? Birds of a feather.
Flock together, exactly. The similarity attraction effect is really powerful. We tend to be drawn to people who are similar to us.
In what ways? Looks, personality.
All of the above, potentially.
Yeah.
Attitudes, values, interests, background, personality traits, even level of physical attractiveness. That's the matching hypothesis.
Why is similarity so attractive?
Well, it's validating, isn't it? If someone shares your views, it makes you feel like your views are correct, reasonable. It also suggests compatibility, smoother interactions, shared activities, less conflict, potentially.
Makes sense. Easier to get along if you're on the same page. And then there's reciprocity. We like people who like us back.
Seems simple, but it's fundamental. Knowing someone likes you is a huge ego boost. It makes you feel good, safe, and warm towards them. It creates this positive feedback loop. I like you because you like me, which makes you like me more, and so on.
A virtuous cycle.
Oh.
Okay, we can't ignore physical attractiveness itself and that halo effect.
Right, the what is beautiful is good stereotype. We have this cognitive bias where we tend to assume, often unconsciously, that physically attractive people also have other desirable qualities.
Like they're smarter, kinder, more successful, just based on looks.
Pretty much. It heavily influences first impressions. You see someone attractive and your brain might just fill in the blanks with positive traits.
Does the effect last?
The report suggests its importance might diminish over time as you actually get to know the person and their real qualities emerge. But initially, it can be a very powerful bias.
So our minds are definitely filtering and shaping attraction based on who's nearby, who's like us, who likes us, and who fits our beauty template.
Exactly. It shows attraction isn't just passive biology. It's an active psychological process, too.
Which brings us neatly to the cultural lens. Society, media.
Yeah.
They must have a huge say in what that beauty template even looks like.
Oh, absolutely massive. The report really emphasizes that beauty standards aren't universal or fixed. They are socially constructed.
Meaning they change.
Dramatically, across different cultures, across different time periods. Think about Renaissance paintings versus, say, the heroin chic look of the 90s. Very different ideals. We learn what's considered beautiful within our specific context.
And the media is the main teacher.
Traditionally, yes. Magazines, TV, movies, they've always disseminated ideals of beauty. But now, social media. Well, it's turbocharged everything.
How so?
It's amplified the reach and intensity. Platforms like Instagram or TikTok are constantly showing us these often highly curated, often digitally altered images. It can create and reinforce very specific trends, like the report mentions the Instagram face, the full lips, high cheekbones, cat eyes, perfect skin.
And that has real effects on people, right?
Yeah.
The report talks about self-esteem issues.
Definitely. Constantly comparing yourself to these often unrealistic, filtered ideals can lead to lower self-esteem, body dissatisfaction, anxiety, even eating disorders or pressure to get cosmetic surgery to match the trend.
Sounds pretty damaging.
It can be. But the report also notes something else happening simultaneously on social media:
Which is?
the rise of counter-narratives. Body positivity movements celebrating natural hair, different cultural beauty standards like K-beauty gaining global traction. Diverse voices are also using these platforms to challenge those narrow, dominant ideals.
So it's a real tension. Homogenization versus diversity.
Exactly. It's like social media both pushes certain narrow looks and provides the space to push back and celebrate difference. Beauty standards feel more fluid and maybe more contested now. It puts more onus on us as individuals to be critical consumers of these images.
That makes sense. And how does this play out in online dating, where pictures are everything initially?
Well, it definitely puts a huge emphasis on that visual first impression. Swiping culture is inherently focused on attractiveness.
So looks might get prioritized even more online.
It seems likely, at least in the initial sorting phase, people might filter potential partners based heavily on physical attractiveness, sometimes overlooking other important compatibility factors. The report also notes tendencies towards matching based on things like education or ethnicity, which can sometimes be inferred visually too.
And people curate their profiles, obviously.
Yeah.
Attractiveness inflation.
Yeah, presenting the absolute best, maybe slightly enhanced version of yourself, which can lead to expectations not quite matching reality when people meet offline. That potential disconnect.
But there's a pushback there, too, towards authenticity.
Yes, movements like #NoFilter, people actively trying to be more real online. It reflects that broader cultural conversation about moving beyond narrow artificial standards and valuing authenticity and a wider range of human appearance.
Okay, so we've covered the evolutionary roots, the brain chemistry, the psychology, the cultural filters. Now, how does this all come together when we think about short-term flings versus long-term love? Does attraction work differently?
The report suggests it does, or at least the emphasis shifts. Initial attraction, that spark, is often heavily driven by the physical stuff and that neurochemical rush, the dopamine, the norepinephrine.
Physical attractiveness is the gatekeeper.
Often, yeah. It gets your attention, opens the door for interaction. It's potent in the early stages.
But for a relationship to actually last, you need more than just looks and chemistry, right?
Absolutely. For long-term bonds, the report highlights things that become much more crucial.
Like,
Similarity in core values, life goals, interests, personality and character kindness, intelligence, humor, dependability, emotional stability, that deep emotional connection and intimacy feeling, understood, supported, accepted.
and companionate love. That sounds less fiery.
It is. It's more about deep friendship, mutual respect, care, and concern for the other person's well-being. That's often the foundation of really lasting relationships. Plus, commitment, interdependence, feeling like a team.
So it shifts from what do I get from this person to what can we build together?
That's a great way to put it. The focus moves towards relational qualities that are developed and nurtured over time. Communication, shared positive experiences, weathering challenges together.
The report mentions an investment model.
Right. The idea is that the longer you're together, the more you invest time, emotions, shared memories, maybe kids or property, the more valuable the relationship becomes to you and the higher the perceived cost of leaving it. That investment fosters commitment.
And it's not always love at first sight, is it? That slow burn idea seems important here, too.
Very important. Attraction can absolutely grow over time. You might not feel that intense initial spark, but as you get to know someone's kindness, their humor, their intellect, share experiences, attraction can develop gradually and deeply.
That really challenges the Hollywood narrative.
It does. It suggests that meaningful, lasting attraction doesn't always start with fireworks. Sometimes it smolders and builds based on those deeper, more substantial qualities.
So, summing this all up,
Mm-hmm.
this deep dive, based on the Self-Sensei report, really shows attraction isn't just one thing.
Not at all. It's this incredible, complex tapestry woven from our evolutionary past, our present brain chemistry, our individual psychology, and the cultural world we live in.
And the ingredients seem to shift over time from those initial, maybe more superficial sparks.
To the deeper qualities of compatibility, character, and shared experience that sustain love long term.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Given all these powerful, sometimes unconscious forces shaping who we find attractive, how might understanding them better actually empower you?
That's a great question.
Like, how might knowing about evolutionary cues or the halo effect change how you navigate your own relationships or even just your first impressions of people? Could it help find a better balance between those gut feelings and, more conscious choices about connection?
It's definitely food for thought. Understanding the why behind attraction doesn't necessarily take away the magic, but maybe it gives us a richer, more conscious way to appreciate and navigate this really fundamental part of being human.